How will the Europeans take on cheap Chinese EV imports? There's a massive charger shake-up with 500, 600 kilowatts and the first of the 1 megawatt chargers on the way. If we build it, will they come? EVs and homes to support the grid. Will we select the good, the bad and the ugly viewer comments once again? We provide a rapid roundup of UK EV public charging prices and reveal the progress of the Fantasy EV virtual stock portfolio. Well, the UK has stated that there will be no tariffs aimed at the Chinese. Europe initially believed that tariffs were essential to protect their auto industry. The US just wants tariffs on everything and everyone, everywhere, all the time. But tariffs, as we're finding out, are a double-edged sword. Impose them on others, and someone will impose their tariffs on you. Europe is now coming round to two dramatic conclusions. First, that while Europe and the US were fighting the arrival of EVs to protect their existing legacy auto jobs, China was secretly racing ahead to become the world's leader in EV technology and EV manufacturing. Second, reinventing the wheel often leads to shoddy wheels. While European Auto were researching how to make better EV NMC batteries, China and Japan were already 3 generations ahead, having gone through LFP, through sodium, and they're now on to solid state. It's now dawning on Europe that they should actually be working with the experts, not fighting them. Well, on the 3rd of June, President Macron, him of France, opened a giant battery gigafactory. I reported in Newsdesk last week that the AESC, Japanese-based but now mainly Chinese-owned world leader in batteries for EVs and grid storage, was building a new factory in Sunderland. Hooray for the UK. Here they are now in France, AESC again. Now, with access to this sort of technology, the UK and France are closing that technology gap to China. Their batteries, like ours in the UK, in the next-gen EVs will be world-leading. More powerful, safer, power-dense and cheaper. Industry and technology, they're now global, accessing the best from anywhere in the world. And this results in better and cheaper EVs. This is starting to show through in France, where the EV market has definitely veered now towards the budget end of the market. And Europe, France in particular, is dominating this sector. In Q1, top sellers were the Renault 5e, new into the league, 16,763 sales. Citroën EC3, new into the league, 12,411 sales. Peugeot third, 5,607. The first, the Chinese BYD, 4,596. The Chinese are hampered by the fact that at present they pay tariffs at about 28%. Renault and Citroën pay 0%. The new BYD Dolphin Surf is currently selling at around €20,000, but as reported from July, that's going to lead to 23,000, leaving the Renault 5 and the EC3 cheaper at 20,000, giving them home advantage. But even if the tariffs on the Chinese are removed, as they're exploring, it still leaves the Dolphin Surf at about the same price. Well, this new battery factory, once up to full production, will surely help Renault, Citroën and Peugeot to remain at the top. It's certainly good for jobs. If you can't beat them, join them. Well, talking about batteries, there's now a massive movement with all these homegrown batteries to look once again at the national grid. In the past, that look was to find out how serious the grid was under threat, with blackouts threatened by all these EVs all charging at the same time, and that's only going to get worse. But in an amazing complete turnaround, the national grid is now seeing that the average house uses less than 10 kilowatt hours a day, but we'll have an EV battery sat outside with 40, 50, even 80 kilowatt hours of power sat there doing nothing. While the EVs will need some of that for themselves, you do have to get to work or to the shops or the beach, but that only uses about 10 kilowatt hours a day. What can we do with the rest? Well, looking back, we now found that the UK government raised this first in a report published in December 2023. I quote, "Bidirectional charging technologies could enable families to charge cars when electricity costs are lowest and use it in their home at peak times when prices are higher." End of quote. Well, industry was not slow to react, toiling away behind the scenes, often in total secrecy, and we're now seeing this heading into production and eventual widespread use. Well, in context, a grid can supply about 75 gigawatts flat out. 1 million cars, each with 40 kilowatts spare, and able to be used by the grid totals 40 gigawatts, about half the size of the grid. And we're aiming to have 10 to 14 million EVs in the UK by 2030. 10 million EVs, each making available 40 gigawatts. Well, it's a lot bigger than the grid. Now add in the huge trend towards adding grid-connected storage in the form of megapacks. Recent installations have taken our UK storage up to 5 gigawatts, it's about 7% of the grid, with a further 127 gigawatts already in the pipeline and under construction. That's bigger than the grid. Now, we don't need here a quick definition lesson. The grid can produce 75 gigawatts at any one time, but sustaining that is a very different equation. That peak 75 gigawatts might only be used for just a few minutes during the adverts in Coronation Street. The rest of the day, we might be using a lot less. Currently, it's running at about 32 gigawatts. Now, while a gas-fired power generator station can supply its peak output continuously as long as it can get and burn gas, batteries can only provide power until the battery's flat. Then they stop. Likewise, wind and solar farms can only produce power when it's daylight or when the wind blows, whichever accordingly. And we do get days where that one or both of them is minimal. So the grid should be, always has been, a balance. The grid in the future will also be a balance, but just using different elements. Batteries will feature massively in this future. In megapacks, backup batteries in EV public chargers and in EVs. All will play a multiple role in this future grid. First, a simple storage for use when the production sources cannot provide sufficient power. Each of them can store electricity when we have plenty and then be able to release it back into the grid when the grid is struggling. For example, we can store electricity in an EV charging installation, backup battery, charged up when there's plenty of power, released if the grid is struggling, takes the load off. This is called peak shaving. Second, we can use it as a standby reserve in case a power source fails and blackout would normally result. Again, not only the grid but also EVs would be able to have continuity of power at public chargers even in a blackout. But the biggest change has been in how the grid and the batteries interact. Those rooftop solar panels on our homes are generally grid following. That is, they check what the grid is operating at, the voltage, frequency, etc., and they set their output to match it. Now, it's fascinating if you've got solar power to check the output of these inverters. You can see it normally on the apps. They show huge variations in the grid supply throughout the day. Grid is highly dynamic. When a load is connected, say you turn on a light, the voltage drops. And if a supply is connected, say a wind farm starts up, the voltage rises. At peak times, the grid voltage is reduced significantly, and at off-peak times, the voltage can be increased quite dramatically. Sometimes that's just momentarily, other times it's for extended periods, but grid-connected batteries are now being used in a grid-forming capacity, not grid-following. If the grid is struggling to balance the output or has many disturbances, the megapacks can now be equipped with inverters, and they can then be used to provide a stabilising supply. Now, this is particularly relevant with intermittent supplies like wind or solar. The intermittent supply could be used as a pass-through in a store. So you have a battery, and the unstable electricity coming from the panels or the turbines is directed into the batteries, and only a stabilised supply is released out into the grid. Even if the wind stopped or got dark, power could still be supplied into the grid. There is much on the horizon, and the first stage is to equip EVs with bidirectional charging capability, and almost all EV manufacturers are now heading this way. Future EVs will all be V2G. Well, far from the EVs being a threat to the grid, they could soon be a vital component part of it. When I find a news item, we look at the maximum charging speed of current EVs. A decade ago, most EVs charged at a maximum of around 150 kilowatts, and chargers available at that time pretty much matched that capacity. Tesla V2 chargers were rated at 150 kilowatts, 400 volts. GridServe installed at that time mainly 75 kilowatt units at 900 volts. Now, about 5 years ago, that all began to change. GridServe began installing the first of their 350 kilowatt chargers at their first hub, then Rugby, Swansea and Exeter followed. Tesla likewise increased the power to 250 kilowatts, still at 400 volts, which was the maximum their EVs could take. Today, it's all changing once again. Tesla broke first with the announcement that their V4 chargers would in future be equipped to provide 500 kilowatts at up to 1,000 volts to allow for future advances. GridServe seems to be pretty much standing still. They've upped their output to 360 kilowatt on their latest chargers. But Ionity now is forging ahead. They recently announced they'd received 600 million euros to expand their network. That's really good news. Sounds like the 500 million that GridServe received recently to expand theirs. And that's certainly worked, as GridServe now appear absolutely everywhere. But in addition to grabbing the money, Ionity announces that future chargers will be 600 kilowatt capable. BYD then goes and tops the lot by announcing their first 1 megawatt charger. Yeah, it would do, wouldn't it? Well, the reason's clear to see. Less than a decade ago, the average charger found in motorway services was a 50 kilowatt dual base shared power. That was just about sufficient at the time, but today they look absolutely pathetically inadequate 5 years ago. So in future, EVs will arrive capable of charging very much faster, especially when solid-state batteries or the first of the capacitor batteries arrive. There's little point in installing 350 kilowatt EV public chargers today if your target market is a road trip EV driver who will have an EV capable of taking 1 megawatt, giving them that much hyped 5-minute top-up time. However, 75 and 150 kilowatt chargers will still have a role, certainly for those who simply want to top up their batteries while eating our Sunday carvery in a country pub on our once-a-week daily trip out. It's horses for courses. Although a 5-minute top-up time is ridiculous for most of us, and we won't pay extra to get it, in time it will drop in price and become standard. But for some it's already vital. Despite laws to protect the workers with hours, etc., delivery drivers are tasked with targets that are seemingly impossible to achieve. Hence why our parcels are now regularly delivered to our doorstep, whether or not we're actually in. They haven't even got time to ring the bell. For them and many others, the 5-minute charging time is pretty much demanded right now. Imagine stopping for a toilet break. You pull in, you plug in, you take your break, you come back, unplug, drive off. You got a full battery. Crazy. Well, this is a classic chicken and egg situation where the manufacturers will say, well, there's no point in paying extra to enable charging at 500 or 600 kilowatts if no chargers can currently supply that. And the EV charger manufacturers will likewise say, well, there's no point installing 600 kilowatt chargers if the fastest car at the moment can only take 350. Well, it seems that the two now are almost working together to ensure that when EVs that can charge around 500 kilowatts are launched, they'll be able to do so, and they'll be able to do that at an already sensible and a growing number of locations. Well, a quick roundup of EV public charging prices reveals some exciting news. More CPOs are now dropping prices, and this is led by Tesla. I've been driving an EV for 5 years, more than. I still have my receipts from every single public charging session I've done. In all those years, I have never seen prices as low as those I found this last weekend in a retail car park. It was White City in Old Trafford, Manchester. It's got a Tesla supercharger, exclusive to Teslas, with an off-peak rate of 20 pence per kilowatt hour. That's cheaper than UK standard variable domestic electricity tariff, set at about 26p. Imagine if you live nearby, you've got a Tesla, and you currently charge at home with a home or granny charger, and you're on a standard or fixed rate tariff. It'll be cheaper to drive to this supercharger and plug in there. In addition to many supercharger locations, including those open to all, the peak and off-peak has been scrapped and they now have a single tariff. Unusual. And no, they've not taken that opportunity to put the prices up doing it. In general, prices have come down significantly. There were multiple locations of open to all superchargers where prices I've seen at 60, 70 or 80 pence at peak times to non-Teslas. These are now around about 50 pence all day and night. Wow! No longer do you need to get up at some ungodly hour just to get cheap charging. But stand by for possible queues. If you know as a non-Tesla driver you can go there and charge any time for 50p a kilowatt hour, it's going to be busy. As a Tesla driver, prices are even lower. They're typically around 38p at certain locations. But this is all going to settle down. Just like when we get unlimited minutes on our mobile contract, we don't spend all day calling everyone we know just to make the most of it. So we will only ever charge what we need to replace, which is what we use. Few people will just go driving continuously around the country just to grab a bargain because they can. But it's a fantastic step in the right direction, and I've got 2 comments. All of you viewers who make wild claims about Elon getting a monopoly and then doubling or quadrupling prices to cash in, your wild made-up claims look wilder than ever. But secondly, all the viewers who've ridiculed me when I repeatedly claimed that an EV charging price war was already in progress can now send your apologies in the normal way. Our comment section is down below and I will accept all those apologies very humbly. Yeah. By the way, if we get sufficient demand for it, we're already compiling a comprehensive list of all the Tesla supercharger locations in the UK, both dedicated and open to all, and we're now monitoring the power ratings and the prices, complete with those peak and off-peak changes or hours if applicable. Now, if anyone wants, we'll make that accessible to Patreon members or YouTube members. So let us know down below if you'd like to see something like that or whether we just keep it for our own use. Well, our comment section still gives us the good, the bad and the ugly. The ugly leads with a viewer clearly unhappy with life in general. False claims, no evidence. This was a video about charging at 20p, yet he claims our chargers are too dear. And it's about Tesla, which has a reliability rate of 99.9%, and he claims unreliable. Then he goes on to fires, depreciation, and finally Elon Musk and China spymobiles. Yeah, there really is no reply suitable for this viewer other than to wonder why he or she watches my videos. For the bad, we get a simple public charging will always be expensive about videos showing how really cheap EV public charging has just become. I think enough said. But a couple of good ones this time. I did love C4dian comment about Manchester United players needing supercharging. Yeah, this was about a charger that was just outside Manchester United football ground. Well, they certainly need something from this year's results. But the best is the simple tale from Stephen Butler 1 reporting those lower prices and claiming, yeah, they must be the cheapest in Wales. Finally, someone who actually watched my video. Thanks. The Fantasy EV Share virtual portfolio is plodding along very nicely. Profit is down, but still well in profit, showing 367.39 on this occasion. It's a healthy looking portfolio. Nothing is showing as if it should be removed. Likewise, nothing is really particularly exciting me this week to buy. Several shares I would like to buy, like CATL, the stock is still not freely available, certainly not on this platform. And the latest uncertainty with Trump once again and his idiotic tariffs once again have thrown an uncertainty into the market. Now, I still like the idea Tesla might finally have got round to launching the robo-taxi, the robo-cab, and as we get closer to the launch date, which is either the 12th or the 16th, depends who you listen to, the dates on which it's due to be launched, there appears to be no backtracking this time. Now, the shares were originally bought at 281.90. They're currently 315.27. So, on a gamble, I'm going to add $2,000 more in the belief that even if it's not this month, it's fairly soon, certainly this year. That's the duration of the portfolio. This now changes the overall picture. Having bought them with total profit now £348. I'm happy with that. Thanks very much for watching. I'm Dave. If you have enjoyed the video, please click the like button. Everyone counts. Also, if you'd like to see more, please subscribe. This is a regular news desk coming out all the time, but we're launching videos all the time. So if you want to be certain of watching those, click the subscribe button and also click the notification bell.